How far would you go to protect someone you love? Now, what if that person was a complete stranger, but their survival meant putting their own life and that of their family in danger? Imagine diving into a river to save a man you've never met, only to discover he's a billionaire involved in a deadly conspiracy. What happens next? Betrayal, ambition, courage, and a secret that could destroy everything. This is the story of the depths we crossed. Stay with us as we discover how one act of bravery changes everything. Before we start, where are you watching from? Do you believe that a single moment of courage can change lives forever? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and intrigue. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the slow-moving river. 14-year-old Eli Bennett crouched on the riverbank, his fishing rod propped against a nearby rock. The quiet hum of cicadas and the occasional plop of a fish breaking the surface filled the air. He sighed, taking in the calm, a rare escape from the chaos of home. "This is it, Dad," Eli murmured, fingers brushing the worn handle of the fishing rod his father had once used. "One big catch, and Mom won't have to worry about dinner." The river was his sanctuary, a place where the weight of his father's death and the struggles his family faced seemed lighter. But the fish weren't biting today, and his thoughts wandered back to the factory accident that had changed everything. His reverie was broken by the distant growl of an engine. Eli turned his head toward the bridge upstream, where a sleek black sedan came to a sudden, screeching stop. Eli froze, eyes fixed on the car. The driver's side door swung open, and a figure stepped out, shrouded in shadows. The man moved to the edge of the bridge, struggling with what looked like a large, heavy bundle. "What the?" Eli whispered, crouching lower into the reeds. Before he could process what he was seeing, the figure heaved the bundle over the railing. A sharp splash echoed across the river, sending a chill down Eli's spine. The man lingered for a moment, then hurried back to the car. The tires screeched as the sedan sped off, disappearing into the trees. Eli's heart raced. He scanned the water, and his breath caught when he saw it. A pale hand breaking the surface, drifting with the current. The hand disappeared under the murky water. "Someone's in there," Eli muttered, scrambling to his feet. Panic set in as he realized no one else was around. He hesitated, his instinct screaming to run for help, but the river's current was swift. Whoever was in the water didn't have long. "Come on, Eli. Do something," he urged himself. Kicking off his sneakers, Eli sprinted toward the riverbank and dove in. The icy water shocked his system, but he pushed forward, arms slicing through the current. "Hold on," he shouted, though the words were swallowed by the rush of the water. The figure came into focus, an older man, face slack and lifeless. Eli grasped the man's arms, his own muscles burning as he fought to keep them both afloat. After what felt like an eternity, Eli's fingers found the muddy bank. He heaved the man onto the shore and collapsed beside him, gasping for air. The man lay motionless, his silver hair plastered to his gaunt face. A deep gash on his temple trickled blood, and bruises marred his wrists. "Hey!" Eli shook the man's shoulder. "Can you hear me?" The man's chest rose faintly. Relief flooded Eli. "I've got to get you help," Eli muttered, patting his soaked pockets. His phone was gone, likely somewhere in the river. Summoning his remaining strength, Eli lifted the man's frail body and began the arduous trek home. When Eli stumbled through the front door, his mother, Rachel, turned from the kitchen sink, her eyes widening in alarm. "Eli, what on earth? Who was that?" she demanded, rushing over. I found him in the river, Eli panted. Someone threw him off the bridge. Rachel's expression shifted from shock to determination. Get him on the couch, she instructed, already reaching for her first aid kit. Eli lowered the man onto the worn cushions, his arms trembling. This is serious, Eli, Rachel said, dabbing at the gash on the man's head. We need to call an ambulance. There's no time, Eli argued. The hospital's too far, and he's barely breathing. You're the only one who can help him. Rachel hesitated, her protective instincts clashing with her training as a nurse. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but once he's stable, we're calling for help. As Rachel worked, Eli turned on the small TV in the corner of the room. The evening news flickered to life. Breaking story tonight, the anchor announced. Billionaire philanthropist Arthur Malone has been reported missing. Authorities say his car was found abandoned near the Riverway Bridge earlier today, sparking fears of foul play. Eli's head snapped toward the screen, his heart pounding. A photo of Arthur Malone appeared, a gaunt man with silver hair and piercing blue-gray eyes. Mom, Eli called, his voice trembling. Rachel looked up, her gaze darting between the TV and the man on the couch. It's him, Eli said. The man I pulled from the river. He's Arthur Malone. Rachel's face paled. What have we gotten ourselves into? The man stirred slightly, his lips moving as though trying to speak. Rachel knelt beside him, her voice gentle but firm. Arthur, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and hazy. A single word escaped his lips, barely audible. Marcus. Rachel and Eli exchanged a worried glance as the weight of their situation settled over them. Arthur stirred, his eyelids fluttering open to the dim light of the Bennett living room. His face was pale, and confusion clouded his blue-gray eyes as they flitted across the room. You're awake, Eli exclaimed, kneeling beside the couch. Where am I? Arthur rasped, his voice hoarse and weak. You're safe, Eli assured him. I pulled you out of the river. You were hurt pretty bad. Arthur frowned, his hand trembling as he touched the bandage on his temple. The river. His voice trailed off, his brow furrowing as if trying to piece together a fragmented memory. Rachel stepped forward, her expression cautious. You were thrown off the bridge, she said bluntly. Do you remember anything about who did it? Arthur winced, shaking his head. No, just flashes. A car. Someone shouting. Then, his eyes widened. The fall. You're lucky to be alive, Rachel said, her tone a mix of relief and wariness. But we need to know who you are and why this happened. My son risked his life to save you. Arthur hesitated, his gaze shifting to Eli. Thank you, he said quietly. My name is Arthur. Arthur Malone. Rachel froze, her eyes narrowing. Arthur Malone? The billionaire? You're all over the news. Arthur's expression darkened. News? Eli nodded. They're saying you're missing, that your car was found near the bridge. Arthur's shoulders sagged, the weight of realization settling over him. Then they know, he murmured. Who knows? Rachel pressed, her arms crossed. Arthur hesitated, his gaze falling to his bruised wrists. I trusted the wrong people. They tried to get rid of me to cover their tracks. Cover their tracks for what? Eli asked. Arthur's voice was barely above a whisper. Greed. Before Rachel could probe further, Eli glanced out the window and stiffened. Parked across the street was a sleek black sedan, its engine idling. Mom, Eli said, his voice low. That car. It's the same one I saw on the bridge. Rachel joined him at the window, her jaw tightening. "Stay inside," she said firmly. "Don't go near it." Arthur looked at them, his expression grave. "If they're watching, they won't stop until they find me." The television buzzed in the background, the anchor's voice sharp and urgent. "Breaking tonight. Billionaire philanthropist Arthur Malone has been reported missing. Speculation of foul play arises after his abandoned car was discovered near Riverway Bridge." Eli sat on the floor, his knees pulled to his chest. "What if they're looking for us now?" Rachel shot him a stern look. "No one's looking for us. They're after him." She gestured to Arthur, who was staring blankly at the screen. When the anchor mentioned Marcus Foster, Arthur's hands curled into fists. "That name," Arthur said, his voice shaking with barely contained anger. "You know him?" Rachel asked. Arthur nodded. "Marcus is my son-in-law. I trusted him to manage my finances. I thought he was family." His voice cracked, and he turned away. Eli exchanged a glance with Rachel. "If Marcus is involved, that means he's behind everything, doesn't it?" Arthur didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the television. Rachel dialed her brother's number, her hands trembling as the phone rang. "Isaac," she said when he picked up. "I need your help. It's serious." Isaac Malone arrived an hour later, his rugged face set in a grim line. He listened intently as Rachel and Eli recounted the events of the past day, his sharp eyes occasionally darting toward Arthur. "You're saying this guy is Arthur Malone?" Isaac asked, his voice skeptical. Arthur nodded. "That's right. And you are?" "Isaac Malone," he said. "Former detective. Rachel's brother." Isaac folded his arms, his gaze piercing. "If Marcus Foster is involved, you've got a big problem. He's got connections, powerful ones." Arthur's jaw tightened. "I know. That's why I need time. There's evidence at my estate that will expose him, but I can't get to it in this condition." Isaac frowned. "You're putting my sister and nephew in danger just by being here. Don't you think I know that?" Arthur shot back, his voice rising. "But if I don't stop Marcus, he'll destroy more than just me." Later that evening, the black sedan reappeared, this time with its headlights off. Eli watched from the window, his stomach knotting. "They're back," he whispered. Isaac grabbed his coat. "Stay inside. I'll handle this." He stepped out, his figure silhouetted against the street light. The car's engine roared to life, and it sped away, leaving Isaac standing in the driveway. "They're watching," Isaac said grimly when he returned. "You need to decide if this man is worth risking everything for." Rachel looked at Eli, then at Arthur. Her voice was steady but strained. "We've already made that decision." Arthur leaned back on the couch, his face pale but resolute. "Then I won't waste it. The evidence is in a safe in my office. If we can get it, we can stop Marcus before he finds us." The chapter ends with Rachel and Isaac exchanging a look of silent agreement, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. The kitchen table was cluttered with papers, a map of the Malone estate, and a flashlight. Isaac leaned over the map, pointing to a shaded area. "This is the side entrance. Less security, fewer cameras," Isaac explained, his voice steady. "If we go in at night, we have a chance of slipping in and out without raising alarms." Arthur nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "The documents are in a safe in my office. Combination lock. I'll need to retrieve them myself." "You're in no shape for this," Rachel argued, crossing her arms. "Let Isaac handle it." Arthur shook his head. "No one else knows the combination, and I won't risk anyone tampering with the files." "I can help," Eli piped up, his voice firm. No, Rachel's response was instant. "You've done enough, Eli." "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom," Eli protested. "I'm the one who pulled Arthur out of the river. I can handle this." "Listen to your mother," Isaac interjected, his tone leaving no room for debate. "This isn't a game, Eli. These people are dangerous." Eli's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, retreating to the corner of the room. In a dimly lit office, Marcus Foster paced back and forth, his expression cold. Across from him sat Decker, his enforcer, a burly man with a calculating gaze. "There's been no sign of him," Decker reported. "But someone saw a boy near the bridge the night he went missing." "A boy?" Marcus stopped, narrowing his eyes. "Local kid. Fishing, probably," Decker continued. "We're looking into it." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "I don't pay you to look into it. Find him, Decker. If Arthur's alive, he's a liability. I want him gone and anyone helping him." Decker nodded, rising from his chair. "Consider it done." As Decker left, Marcus poured himself a drink, his mind racing. Arthur's survival wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat to everything he'd built. The night was cool and still as Isaac and Arthur approached the Malone estate, their footsteps muffled by the soft grass. The towering gates loomed ahead, but Isaac led Arthur to the side entrance he had marked on the map. "Stay close," Isaac whispered, scanning the area with practiced precision. Arthur nodded, his breathing labored but determined. They slipped through the gate and made their way toward the house, avoiding the main paths and staying in the shadows. Inside, the estate was eerily quiet. Isaac guided Arthur to the office, his ears straining for any sound of movement. "There," Arthur whispered, pointing to the safe hidden behind a painting. Isaac moved to the door, keeping watch while Arthur knelt in front of the safe. His fingers trembled as he entered the combination. The lock clicked open, and Arthur retrieved a stack of documents. "Got it," Arthur said, his voice low. Before they could leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Isaac signaled for Arthur to hide as he pressed himself against the wall, his hand on his weapon. A guard passed, muttering into his radio, but didn't notice them. "Let's move," Isaac whispered, and they slipped out the way they came. Back at the Bennett home, Eli was pacing the living room when Isaac and Arthur returned, their faces drawn. "Did you get it?" Eli asked eagerly. Arthur nodded, holding up the stack of documents. "Everything we need to prove Marcus's crimes." "Good," Rachel said, relief evident in her voice. But Isaac's expression remained grim. "They know something's up. It's only a matter of time before Marcus retaliates." Arthur sank into the couch, his exhaustion catching up to him. "Then we need to move fast. These documents are enough to ruin him, but only if we can get them into the right hands." Rachel looked at Eli, then back at Arthur. "And what happens to us when Marcus realizes we're the ones who exposed him?" Arthur met her gaze, his expression serious. "I'll make sure he doesn't touch you. You have my word." The next afternoon, Eli walked home from school, his thoughts consumed by the events of the previous night. He didn't notice the black sedan parked down the street until it was too late. The car door opened, and Decker stepped out, blocking Eli's path. "Hey, kid," Decker said, his tone casual but menacing. "Got a second?" Eli's heart pounded. I need to get home." Decker smirked. "It'll just take a minute. I'm looking for someone. An old man. Thought you might have seen him." "I don't know anything," Eli stammered, trying to step around Decker. Decker's hand shot out, grabbing Eli's arm. "Don't lie to me, kid. Lying makes things worse." Eli yanked his arm free and bolted down the street, his legs burning as he sprinted home. When he burst through the door, Rachel and Isaac were already on their feet. "Eli, what happened?" Rachel demanded. "Someone stop me," Eli gasped. He was asking about Arthur. Isaac's face darkened. "Marcus's men. They're getting closer." Arthur stood, his expression grim. "Then we don't have much time. We need to act before they do." Arthur sat at the kitchen table, his hands trembling as he stared into the mug of tea Rachel had set before him. The quiet tension in the room was palpable. "Arthur," Eli began, sitting across from him, "what are you not telling us?" Arthur sighed heavily, his silver hair glinting in the dim light. "There's something I need to say. Something I should have said from the start." Rachel and Isaac exchanged wary glances. Arthur looked at Eli, his voice thick with emotion. "Years ago, one of my foundation's factories. There was an explosion." Eli's eyes narrowed. "I know. My dad worked there. He didn't make it." Arthur swallowed hard, his guilt etched into every line of his face. "It was my fault, Eli. I didn't know the factory was cutting corners, but I should have. I should have seen the warnings. I was so focused on profits, on expanding the foundation." His voice cracked. "I failed, and people paid the price." Eli stared at him, his fists clenched. "You're saying my dad's death is on you?" Rachel stepped forward, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Eli, calm down." "No," Eli snapped, rising from his chair. "I risked everything for him. For someone who He couldn't finish the sentence, his voice choked with emotion. Arthur's gaze didn't waver. "I can't undo what happened, Eli, but I can try to make it right. Help me stop Marcus. It's the only way I can begin to atone for what I've done." Eli stormed out of the room, leaving Rachel and Isaac to face Arthur's somber expression. The next morning, the black sedan reappeared, parked down the street from the Bennett's house. Isaac peered through the curtains, his expression grim. "They're watching us," he said. "They know Arthur's here." Rachel frowned, her arms crossed. "What do we do?" Isaac turned to Arthur. "We need to move. Staying here puts everyone at risk." Arthur nodded. "I understand, but we need to get the evidence to someone who can use it. The police, the press, someone who can't be bought off by Marcus." Eli entered the room, his expression guarded. "If we run, what's stopping them from finding us again?" Isaac smirked. "They won't find us where I'm thinking of going." The Bennetts packed quickly, the tension thick in the air. Eli avoided Arthur, his anger simmering just below the surface. As they loaded the car, Isaac pulled Eli aside. "You've got guts, kid, but this isn't the time to hold on to grudges." Eli scowled. "You don't know what it's like. He let my dad die." Isaac nodded. "You're right. I don't. But I do know this. Marcus isn't going to stop until Arthur's dead. If we don't stand together, none of us are walking away from this." Eli hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. What do you need me to do?" Arthur approached cautiously. "Eli, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need your help. Marcus has no limits. If we don't stop him, more families will suffer." Eli's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Let's get this over with." That night, as the family settled into Isaac's secluded cabin, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. "They found us," Isaac yelled, grabbing his revolver. Rachel ushered Eli and Arthur toward the back room. "Stay down." Decker and two men stormed into the cabin, their faces cold and determined. "Hand him over," Decker growled. "Now." Isaac stepped forward, his gun raised. "Not a chance." The room erupted into chaos as Decker lunged, grappling with Isaac. Arthur grabbed a fire poker, swinging it at one of the intruders and knocking him to the ground. Eli crouched in the back room, clutching the stack of documents. His heart pounded as the fight raged on. Rachel burst in, her face pale. "Eli, we need to move. Now." Eli nodded, clutching the papers as they slipped out through the back door, disappearing into the woods. Eli and Rachel stumbled through the dark forest, Arthur lagging behind. They stopped by a creek, their breaths visible in the cold night air. "Do you think Isaac's okay?" Eli asked, his voice trembling. Rachel nodded, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "He's tough. He'll be fine." Arthur leaned against a tree, his breathing labored. "We can't keep running. Marcus will find us eventually." Eli looked at the documents in his hands, then back at Arthur. "Then we fight back. We take these to the press, expose Marcus for what he's done." Rachel smiled faintly. "You're starting to sound like your father." Eli's resolve hardened. "Let's finish this." Arthur sat at Isaac's desk, his fingers trembling as he adjusted the microphone on the laptop. Eli stood nearby, watching intently as the older man prepared to deliver a message that could change everything. "This is it," Arthur said, glancing at Isaac. "We're sending this straight to the press." Isaac nodded. "Make it count." Arthur took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "My name is Arthur Malone. If you're watching this, it's because I've survived an attempt on my life orchestrated by Marcus Foster, my son-in-law. For years, I trusted him with my finances and my family's future, only to discover he had embezzled millions and betrayed that trust." He held up a folder of documents. "These records prove Marcus's crimes. They include falsified transactions, offshore accounts, and a pattern of manipulation that he used to steal from my foundation. When I confronted him, he tried to kill me, throwing me off the Riverway Bridge. But thanks to the bravery of a young man, Eli Bennett, I am alive today to tell the truth." Arthur's voice wavered slightly, but he pressed on. "Marcus is dangerous. He will stop at nothing to silence those who stand in his way. I ask anyone watching this to help bring him to justice. Together, we can ensure he is held accountable for his actions." Isaac hit the upload button, and the video began its journey across the internet. Within minutes, reporters started calling, and news outlets began sharing the damning footage. "Now we wait," Isaac said. At his mansion, Marcus sat rigid in his office chair, his face pale as he watched Arthur's video. His hands clenched into fists, and he slammed them onto the desk, sending papers flying. "How did this happen?" he growled. Decker stood by the door, his expression uneasy. "It's everywhere. The press, social media. It's out of control. Fix it," Marcus shouted, his voice shaking with rage. Decker hesitated. "There's only so much we can do. The evidence is solid. If this goes to court..." Marcus cut him off, his tone cold and calculating. "If it goes to court, I'll make sure none of them live to testify." Decker shifted uncomfortably. "The press is watching. Anything happens to them now, and it'll lead straight back to you." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "Then we'll discredit them. I want dirt on Arthur, Isaac, the Bennetts, anyone connected to this. Find something, anything, and make it stick." Decker nodded and left, leaving Marcus alone with his seething fury. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Eli took the stand. His palms were sweaty, and his heart pounded as he adjusted the microphone. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Eli Bennett," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "Eli, can you tell the court what happened the night of August 15th? Eli glanced at Arthur, who who sat at the prosecution table, giving him a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, Eli recounted the events of that fateful night. Seeing the car on the bridge, the splash in the river, and his desperate dive to save Arthur. "And after you saved Mr. Malone?" the prosecutor asked. Eli hesitated. "We brought him home. He was hurt. My mom, she's a nurse, took care of him." The defense attorney rose, his sharp gaze fixed on Eli. "Mr. Bennett, you're 14 years old, correct?" "Yes," Eli replied. "And you expect this court to believe that you, a child, witnessed and understood everything that happened that night?" "I know what I saw," Eli said firmly, his voice steadying. "And I know that Marcus Foster tried to kill him." The trial's momentum shifted when the prosecution called Thomas Crane, Marcus's former business associate, to the stand. Crane's presence was unexpected, and Marcus's face darkened as the man approached the witness stand. "Mr. Crane," the prosecutor began, "can you explain your relationship with Marcus Foster?" Crane nodded. "I worked with him on several financial ventures. At first, I thought everything was legitimate, but I started noticing irregularities. Money being funneled into offshore accounts, transactions that didn't add up. And did you confront Mr. Foster about these irregularities?" Crane hesitated, his gaze flicking to Marcus. "Yes, but he told me to keep quiet. He said no one would ever find out." The courtroom murmured as Crane continued, detailing how Marcus had orchestrated a web of deceit to siphon money from Arthur's accounts. "Why are you testifying today, Mr. Crane?" the prosecutor asked. Crane's voice trembled. "Because I can't live with what I've done. I need to make this right." After hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The foreperson stood, her expression solemn as she read the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Foster, guilty on all counts of embezzlement, fraud, and attempted murder." The courtroom erupted, reporters scrambling to capture the moment. Marcus slumped in his seat, his once confident demeanor shattered. Arthur turned to Eli and Rachel, his eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it," he said quietly. Eli smiled faintly, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, Arthur placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "You were brave, Eli. More than I ever was." "Thank you." Eli nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. For the first time, he felt like he'd truly honored his father's memory. The morning sun cast its golden rays across the Bennett home as Rachel bustled about the kitchen. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of Eli zipping up his backpack. "Ready for your first day?" Rachel asked, her tone warm but tinged with nervousness. Eli nodded, glancing down at the pristine uniform he wore. "Feels weird. St. Gabriel's isn't exactly like the schools around here." Rachel smiled, her eyes softening. "You've earned this, Eli." Arthur made sure of it. Eli hesitated. "Do you think he's okay?" "I haven't heard from him since the trial." Rachel set down her mug, crouching to meet his eyes. Arthur needed some time to put his life back together. "He'll come back when he's ready." Eli slung his backpack over his shoulder, a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty flashing across his face. "I guess it's time to put my life together too." Rachel pulled him into a hug. "You already have, sweetheart. Go show them what you're made of." Later that day, a sleek, understated car pulled up outside the Bennett home. Arthur Malone stepped out, his posture straighter and his face healthier than when Eli had last seen him. In his hands, he carried a small gift box. Rachel opened the door, her surprise quickly giving way to a warm smile. "Arthur, we weren't expecting you." I thought it was time to visit, Arthur said, stepping inside. I owe you both so much. Eli entered the living room, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Arthur. Arthur, you're back. Arthur smiled and held out the box. For you. Eli opened it carefully, revealing a custom fishing rod with his initials engraved on the handle. His breath caught. This is amazing. Thank you. Arthur nodded, his voice sincere. You saved my life, Eli. I thought it was fitting to give you something for the river, where everything began. Rachel placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. You didn't have to do this. Arthur met her gaze. It's the least I could do. Your family gave me more than just safety. You gave me hope. That evening, Eli walked to the riverbank, the new fishing rod slung over his shoulder. The water shimmered in the fading light, and the hum of cicadas filled the air. He sat on a familiar rock, running his fingers over the rod's engraving. Memories of the past few weeks flooded back. The bridge, the rescue, the trial. You did good, Dad, he murmured, gazing out at the water. I think you'd be proud of me. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. Arthur approached, his hands tucked into his pockets. Mind if I join you? Arthur asked. Eli gestured to the rock beside him. Sure. The two sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Arthur spoke. The river feels different now, doesn't it? Eli nodded. Yeah, it's not just a place to fish anymore. It's where everything changed. Arthur looked at him, his expression solemn. You're a remarkable young man, Eli. You've faced things most adults wouldn't have the courage to face. Eli shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. I just did what I thought was right. Arthur chuckled softly. Sometimes, that's the hardest thing to do. A week later, as Rachel prepared dinner, another knock echoed at the door. This time, it was Isaac, carrying an envelope. Thought you'd want to see this, he said, handing it to Rachel. She opened it, her eyes widening. Inside was a letter from the district attorney's office, thanking Eli for his bravery and confirming Marcus Foster's sentence. Enclosed was a commendation for his testimony, recognizing his role in bringing justice to Arthur's case. Eli read the letter, his chest swelling with pride. I didn't think I'd get anything like this. You earned it, kid, Isaac said, clapping him on the shoulder. Not many people your age or any age would have done what you did. Rachel's eyes glistened as she hugged her son. We're so proud of you, Eli. On a bright Saturday morning, Arthur returned once more, this time with news. I've decided to rebuild, he announced over breakfast. Rebuild what? Rachel asked. My foundation, Arthur replied. The right way this time. No shortcuts, no compromises. And I'd like your family to be a part of it. Rachel looked at Eli, then back at Arthur. What do you mean? I want to offer you a position, Rachel. You've shown strength and compassion that I admire. And Eli, Arthur added, turning to the boy, I want to mentor you. I see so much potential in you. Eli's jaw dropped. Me? But I'm just a boy who saved a life and stood up for justice, Arthur interrupted. The world needs more people like you, Eli. Rachel smiled, her hand resting on Eli's. What do you think, honey? Eli grinned. I think I'm ready. As they shared a laugh, the future seemed brighter than ever. Together, they had weathered the storm, and now they stood on the edge of a new beginning. What would you do if you found yourself in Eli's shoes? A single moment of bravery led him to uncover secrets that could have destroyed lives, including his own. His decision to jump into the river not only saved Arthur Malone, but also sparked a chain of events exposing greed, betrayal, and the true meaning of courage. Now, think about your own life. How far would you go to stand up for justice, even if it meant risking everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have made the same choices as Eli? Your perspective matters, and we can't wait to hear from you. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Join us for more thrilling narratives, inspiring acts of bravery, and stories that make you think about the depths of courage. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and stay tuned for more. Together, let's uncover the stories that remind us what it means to be truly human.